So we're looking at the Mishnah here on Daf Lamed Beis Amid Beis. This Mishnah is a continuation of what's called Nazirus B'tos. And the Mishnah is going to introduce a new case of Nazirus B'tos, where, let's say, two people are fighting about something, and each one is makabel Nazirus based on the assumption that he's got the right answer to the question, and he's, justice is with him. And again, it's not necessarily two people that are arguing. It could be more than two people. But the Mishnah says the following. So we're on Lamed Beis, Amid Beis, about 15 lines up before the end of the Amud. So there's a group of people, and somebody's coming towards them. And one of the people in the group says that I can identify that figure, it's Reuven. And Hareini Nazir, if, as a matter of fact, it's true, and will reveal that it's Reuven, and my identification was correct, then I will be a Nazir. V'echad, another person in the group, Amar, he declared, that person is not Reuven, but rather Shimon. Hareini Nazir, if it's Shimon, or at least if it's not Reuven, we'll see. And the Shlishi, a third person in the group, says to the first two, Hareini Nazir, I'm going to become a Nazir. She'echad mikem Nazir. In other words, if one of the two of you are saying the truth and you're correct, then I should become a Nazir. But the other one of you two is incorrect. And now a fourth guy comes forward, and he repeats what the third guy says, but just in the opposite. And he says, I'm going to be a Nazir, she'ein echad mikem Nazir, because you're all wrong, and none of you are Nazirin. Now a fifth person comes along, and he says, Shnechem Nazirin, that I'm going to be a Nazir if the truth is that two of you are Nazirin, which means that each one of you was makabel Nazirus, even if he's not correct. He's making his Nazirus contingent on somebody else. And then the sixth guy says to the first five, I'm going to be a Nazir if the truth is that kulchem Nazirim, that each one of you is makabel Nazirus, even if you're not saying the right thing, but rather you're making your Nazirus contingent on that which is definitely bevadai lo shehu emes. So what happens in this very complicated scenario? We have here machlokas between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel and Rabbi Tarfa. Beit Shammai say kulam nazirin, even though the nazirus was accepted on toes, and each one is contradicting the next one because the first two contradicted each other, and the fifth and the sixth cannot actually become a reality, can't come to fruition, because in their opinion, the they were accepting Nazirus under all circumstances, unconditionally, if they're making a mistake. And he writes here, Elamitoch shahoya vadai, Etzlom, Shehem Tzodkim, they were so convinced that they were right, that they made Nazirus depending on whatever they would say. And Beit Shammai say, no, none of them are Nazirim. Eino Nazir, just the opposite of Beit Shammai. Ela Mishalo Niskaimu Dvorov, even though, I should say only that one, Shalonis Kaimidvarov, and it turns out that what he said is incorrect. He's the one that's going to be the exception to the rule. And Rabbi Tarfon has a middle sheet. We'll go over this in Mitzvah again to get some of the details. I just want to get the general sense of the Mishnah. Is ein echad mihem Nazir. None of them have accepted upon themselves Nazirus, which is binding, because there's nothing absolutely clear at the time that they took the Nazirus. So we need, according to Rabbi Tarfon, that at the time of the Kabbalah's Nazirus, everything should be clear, and we know exactly whether or not he's a Nazir. But if a person accepts upon himself these kind of, conditional Nazirus, if this, if that, if the other thing, and we don't have clarity and absolute certainty at the time of his Kabbalah's Nazirus that the Tanai was fulfilled, the Nazirus is not Chal. And we're going to see that Rabbi Tarfon derives this from a special pasuk. So let's go back to the beginning of the Mishnah once again, and let's see. So we now know that when it says in the Mishnah, Yemahalchim Baderech, that it means there's 6 people who are in this group, and they are confronting a Echad Mem Ba Kenegdo, one person. We don't know who he is. The Omar Echad Mihem, so we'll call him the first of the 6, declares that this guy is Ruvain. Hareini Nazir Shezeh Ploni. My Nazirus is ala Tanai, that this guy is Ruvain. So that's the first statement. And again, according to Rabbi Tarfon, Ein Echad Mihem Nazir, because there's no such thing as a Nazirus ala Tanai. It's got to be definite. We don't know for sure whether it's Ruvain, at least at that moment when he took the Nazirus. But Beis Hillel Beit Shammai reject Rabbi Tarfon. There is such a thing as Nazirus ala Tanai. The Echad, now we're up to the second guy amongst the 6. Omar, he declares that this fellow is definitely not Ruvain. V'hareini Nazir she'ein zeh ploni. And if I'm saying the truth that this is not Ruvain, I recognize that this is not Ruvain, then I should become a Nazir. Now we get to number 3. So number 3 turns to the first 2, and he says, Hareini Nazir, if I'm saying correctly, she'echad mikem Nazir, so it sounds like the Shlishi is definitely accepting upon himself Nazirus, because he says that Echad mikem, only one of the 2 of you are a Nazir, or has become a Nazir. Because either this guy who's coming against them is either Ruvain or he's not Ruvain. So either the first guy is a Nazir and the second guy is not, or the reverse. Now we get to the Revi. Now the Revi says the exact opposite of the Shlishi. What does he declare? Hareini Nazir emes kidvar she'ein echad mikem Nazir. So I'm trying to figure out here, the translation here is not doing it for me. How is the Revi different than the Shlishi? The Shlishi said that Hareini Nazir she'echad mikem Nazir, which we thought that's definitely true, and that's a definite Kabbalah's Nazirus. So what's the Revi adding to the Shlishi, or is he just he says here in the translation Elohafach Tfaravi Omar. He said the exact opposite. That what? Hareini Nazir ima emes kidvarai she'ein echad mikem Nazir. What's she'ein echad mikem Nazir? You have a translation of those words, maybe? she'ein echad mikem nazir. He writes here that he, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it's I do actually 1 second.
I'll just read you the Hebrew while you're reading the English. I don't know who goes first, me or you. But anyway, he says, she'ein echad mikem, she'echad mikem bilvad, sheyimtza, she'eino tzodek, eino nazir. He won't be a nazir. It's like a double negative.
Yeah, so it means one of you is not a Nazir. So I think it means
one of you is mistaken,
right.
and therefore you're not a nazir. But the other person who is correct will be a nazir. It seems to me that he's repeating. I mean, in essence, he's repeating what the Shlishi said. Okay, let's hear what ArtScroll says. Does he agree with that?
ArtScroll says it's like the converse, but it means the same thing. It means one of the first two are not a Nazir.
Right. So the third guy, the difference between the third guy and the fourth guy is where the third guy says that one of you and only one of you is correct. The fourth guy says one of you and only one of you is incorrect. She'ein echad mikem nos, that one of you is making a mistake about the identity of that person. I don't know which one it is who made the mistake, but in any event, he's not a Nazir, but I'll become a Nazir because one. So again, what I understand so far is that although between the first and the second guy, we don't know yet, at least, who's the Nazir, but as far as the third and the fourth guy, those guys for sure were Makabel Nazirus. Does the commentary you have seem to support that?
I think it's the third and fourth are the same, but they're saying something different.
No,
the third one's.
But is there any question as to the validity of the Kabbalah's Nazirus of the third and fourth? Is there any doubt about that? It seems to me that either the guy who's coming is Reuven or he's not Reuven. So either the first guy was Makabel Nazirus and the second guy was not, or the second guy was Makabel Nazirus and the first is not. But as far as the third and the fourth is concerned, he's saying that one of the two of you was Makabel Nazirus and the other was not Makabel Nazirus. Again, they say it in different ways, but that's basically what both the third and the fourth are saying. Because I'll read it again. He says, the third guy says, Areni Nazir, she'echad mikem Nazir. Only one of you is a Nazir, which is true. We don't know if it's the first guy or the second guy, but one of the two is correct, and therefore he's a Nazir, not the other guy. And that's pretty much what the fourth fellow online says as well, just in the opposite way. He says it, she'ein echad mikem Nazir. So again, I'm going to submit the following statement, either I'm right or I'm wrong, that the third and the fourth are definite Kabbalah's Nazirus. Now we get to the fifth guy.
I think that's right, yeah.
Now the fifth guy, again, like the third and the fourth, turn to the first two guys, and he says that I'm going to be a Nazir if both of you are Nazirim. Now that's impossible. So it seems to me that the fifth guy certainly is not a Nazir. Right, because the fifth guy says I'm a Nazir if Shnechem Nazirim.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Yeah.
Then by definition, that can't be so.
Right.
Now let's go on to number 6 in the list. Now he's turning to the first 5, and he says, already Nazir if Kulchem Nazirim, which also can't be true. Right. It can't be true that all of them, right, all the 5 except the Naziris. That's absolutely impossible. So Beit Shammai Omrim Kulam Nazirim. So again, we'll come back to Beit Shammai in a minute. I'm just interested in Beis Hillel for a second. Beis Hillel Omrim Eino Nazir. Now, I think Eino Nazir has to be understood as the beginning of a sentence. You can't cut him off with those words, Eino Nazir, but rather Eino Nazir Ella Mishalonis Kaimu Dvarav, which I think it means that we go through each one. Let's say, for example, on the side that the unidentified mysterious figure is actually
guys
is actually Reuven. then the first guy was Makabel Nazirus. The second guy was not Makabel Nazirus. The third and the fourth guys were Makabel Nazirus. And the fifth guy.
Can you wait just 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Give me 1 second.
The fifth guy, I'm just trying to figure out. The fifth guy said to the first two guys that Shnechem Nazirim, that certainly is not Nazirus. And therefore the sixth guy who says Kulchem Nazirim, that's also certainly not Nazirus. Well, let's go back to Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai claim that Kulam Nazirim. What does that mean? Even though we're going back to Beit Shammai now. Beit Shammai says that even though it's impossible that they're all correct, but nevertheless they're all Nazirim. So even though there's a stira, Divrayim Sosrim Zed, because if you take a look at the first two guys, they said the exact opposite in terms of their Kabbalas Naziris, depending upon whether this figure is Ruvain or not. And we said already that the fifth and sixth guys certainly can't be Nazirim, because it can't be that both the first two guys are Nazirim. And the answer is that Beit Shammai have a principle, which I wonder if they're going to derive it from Psukim, that when a person wants to be Makabel Nazirus, he wants to be Makabel Nazirus even if he turns out to make a mistake. So that he thought for sure he's right, again, which I don't understand exactly, how the fifth and sixth guys can think that they're right. That I don't know. But be it as it may, therefore, since somehow the fifth and sixth guys convinced themselves that they are absolutely correct, then that was their machshava, and they were Makabel Nazirus, even though, again, they made a mistake. Because it can't be Shnechem Nazirim or Kulchem Nazirim. And Beis Hillel take this seriously, and we'll see which of the six guys have a valid Kabbalas Nazirus. It's going to be one of the first two. It's going to be the third and the fourth, but not the fifth and the sixth. And now comes Rabbi Tarfel, which with his super principle that none of them are Nazirim, because Nazirus has to be a definite upfront. It's got to be crystal clear that he was accepting upon himself Nazirus. And we'll see in the footnote here that Rabbi Tarfel derives this from a pasuk. Ish ki yafli lindar neder nazir tzarich lahafli lefarish dvar b'shas kabbalas Nazirus. So it's got to be definite and absolutely clear at the time of his Kabbalas Nazirus. Now the Mishnah goes ahead and clarifies the din of those who took the Nedarim in a situation where it doesn't clarify itself. We never really get absolute clarity and clarification who is the right one. So now, Hirtia Lachorov, the person who was coming towards them, which may or may not be Ruvain, but he ran away. So we cannot identify him. Eino Nazir. None of the six guys could be a Nazir. Now, it's even though that it's definite that somebody's correct, but we don't know at the end of the day who is correct. Again, I don't know how you're going to deal with the third and the fourth guys. That I don't know. But he says, Af echad mehem, ein af echad mehem nazir. So this has to do with the principle I think we learned earlier, Masechet Nazir, and that's the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda on Daf. I'm not sure where it is actually, maybe Daf Ches, but he says that Safek Nazirus Lahakil, there's a person does not mean to accept Nazirus on a Safek. But again, what does that have to do with the third and the fourth? Oh, that's it. That since neither the Nazirus of number one nor the Nazirus number two is Chal, therefore the Nazirus of 3 and 4 cannot be Chal, because they made their Nazirus contingent on the fact that one of the first two is a Nazir, but that's not
right.
seen.
Right.
Okay. Now the Mishnah quotes the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, and he says a person, Safek Nazirus Lachver, a person does accept upon himself Nazirus of a Safek, and each one here is a Nazir Misafek. again, I would think that the third and the fourth are Nazir and B'toras Vadai. But I guess since they're told that Nazirus on the first and the second, and the first and the second is a Nazirus Misafek, even according to Rav Shimon, there's no possibility of bringing his karbanos at the end of his Nazirus, which allows him to do the Tiglachas, because he might be bringing Chulin Lazar, because we don't really know who is the real Nazir, because Reuven flew the coop. And I still come back to the third and the fourth. Do you have anything, perhaps, in your commentary about the third and the fourth?
It says about the third and the fourth that it's the same thing, that they're both the same because
No, that I heard that from you more than once, Ira, and I agree with you 1,000%. I'm asking whether or not the third and the fourth are Nazirim. I'm not differentiating between 3 and 4. They're both in the same boat. But are they Nazirim or are they not Nazirim?
Oh, I see. Okay.
I just want to clarify. There should be a note about that.
According to who?
Well, now we're going according to Rav Shimon, who says that they can't bring their karbanos because they're in a suffix. But I don't see why 3 and 4 are a suffix. It seems to be that they're a vadai. Why? Because the third guy said, Hareini Nazir she'echad mekem Nazir, that one of you is a Nazir. And that's absolutely true, that one of them is a Nazir. And again, the fourth guy said the same thing as the third guy, more or less, just he switched it around. I'm just pointing out that it would seem to be that all these discussions about whether a suffix Nazir is a Nazir, which is Rav Shimon's Shita, or a suffix Nazir is not a Nazir, according to Rav Yehuda, the bottom line should be that as far as the third and the fourth guy on the line, they don't even enter into the question of suffix Nazir, because they just said Echad Mehem, and it's absolutely true of Echad Mehem.
So, based on what ArtScroll is saying,
Yeah,
I think Rav Shimon is saying, if the condition on which he made the vow is indeed fulfilled, he is another by force of his original declaration. So then number 3 and number 4 would be, because their condition was fulfilled.
I think
the answer is yes. And if the condition was not fulfilled, then he adopts Nazirus voluntarily.
But somebody should point that out, that all our discussions here are about the first 2 guys, not about the second set of third and fourth. I don't see that here. Just 1 second. Maybe, again, there's a lot of notes here in the small print, so I don't have time to read them all. But maybe this note could be relevant. The Meiri apparently says that the Mishnah has a second scenario when there's a person coming towards the group, and one of them was Makabel Atzmo Nazirus be Echad Mishon Salam im Echad Mikem Nazir, or im Ein Echad Mikem Nazir, or im Shnechem Nazirim, or im Kulchem Nazirim, Nimtza Shalonis Kaimu Dvara, B'Shnei Mikrim Elu, Nechleku Beit Shammai Beis Hillel. So I don't know, the Meiri has a different twist on our Mishnah. Let's take a look at the Gemara for a minute. Oh, we didn't finish the Mishnah yet. He says that there was a takana that was made according to Rabbi Shimon that each one should make the following condition: V'yomar im hoya kidvarai harei nazir chova. If in truth I was correct, then I am now accepting upon myself to be knowing my nazirus mishum chova. V'im lav, if in truth lo niskaimu dvarai, I was wrong, then Areini Nazir Nadav. I'm now accepting upon myself a brand new Nazirus. I'm volunteering a new Kabbalist Nazirus. And what do we gain from this? Now, even according to Reb Shimon, he can bring his karma when he completes his Nazirus, and he can be Megaleh, of course, Mimonavshach. Either because he accepted upon himself a Nazirus of Chova, and if that Nazirus of Chova is not Chal, because let's say he was wrong in the Kiyum, then he now has a new Nazirus that he's accepting upon himself right now, and therefore he's bringing his Karbonos. So the Mishnah is making a takana, offering a way out of this maze to allow the Nazir, B'siyim Naziruso, to bring his Karbonos. The Gemara now asks the following kasha on Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel holds that Misha Lonis Kaimu Dvarov Hu Nazir. Well, what does that mean? Misha Lonis Kaimu Dvarov Hamayavi Nazir. That doesn't make any sense. Right? Beis Hillel is saying that if you made a mistake, then there's no Chalos Nazirus. So it should be Mishan is Kaimu Dvarav Lebasof. He needs Nazirus. His Nazirus is Chal. And if you look at the language of Beis Hillel, we didn't pay so much attention to it in the Mishnah. He says Misha Lon is Kaimu Dvarav. He's the one who's in Nazir. On Rabbi Yehuda Emo, we should change the girsa. Mishan is Kaimu Dvarav. Only the one who's correct in his contingency, in his Tanai. He's the Nazir. Now we turn to Daf Lamed Gimel. Abaye Omar. Abaye claims that you don't have to change the girsa in the Mishnah, but rather, what's the case in the Mishnah? The scenario is Kagon Sha Omar, the first Noder, said, after he said Hareini Nazir Shezeh Ploni, Inami lav ploni hu a heavy nazir. He added the following stipulation. He said, even if the person who's coming towards me is not Ruvain, I'll still be a nazir. So it means that he changed his mind. Originally said that his nazirus is al tanai, that so-and-so is Ruvain. Then he changed his mind. He regrets and he rescinds his original statement. And now he's accepting upon himself nazirus, even on the tzad that the person who's coming towards them is not Ruvain. Umay, and now we can explain the words of Beis Hillel. Eino nazir lemisha lonis kaim dvarav. It means lonis kaim dvarav for Rishonim. His original statement, when he made the t'nai that so-and-so is Ruvain, and then I'll be a nazir, that was lonis kaim dvarav, because it turns out it's not Ruvain. El dvarav achronim. But rather, his second statement, his last statement, his final position that if it's not so-and-so, it's not Ruvain, I still want, I'm a kabbalah on myself as Zirus, that makes him into a Nazir. I mean, the obvious difficulty here in accepting Abaye is that Abaye is pushing into the Mishnah, a whole different pshat. That's not the simple pshat in the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah said, Ertil achorov einu Nazir. What happens is that Ruvain, who is coming towards them, now goes the opposite direction, turns his back, and we cannot identify him. So the Gemara's Medaik Taima, the reason why the Nazirus is not Chal is Mishum Der Tiachora, Fasi Lekamon Havi Nazir, Mani. If we can identify him, so again, if we cannot identify him, he flew the coop, then we're going to be Mekil, and there's no Nazirus Misafek, which sounds like Rabbi Yehuda sheet. But if Ha'asi L'Kama, the implication is that if we can identify him, then he would be a Nazir. And the Gemara wants to ask, Mani, which sheet in the Tanoim is reflected by our Mishnah that if we can identify him, he's a Nazir? So the Gemara is going to analyze this on Daf Lamed Dalet Omen Aleph, correct? Just make one change over here if you don't mind.